Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so we're here for Falling in Love in London painting. I'm going to be showing you step by step. So just type hi in the chat where you're from, and we'll get started shortly. Hi, guys. Hi, Vicky, Karen, and everyone. Hello from Seattle and Texas. Nice. So we only just need black, white, and then a little bit of red. That's it. Brushes, large, some sort of medium, square, flat, or round, and a smaller detailed brush. And hopefully we're excited to paint something that's more just monochromatic scheme, some gray tones and just a little pop of color. Ooh, Australia. And Lindsay close by from me. So make sure you have your water cup as well. Those brushes that I said, just an assortment of large, medium, and small. We can make pretty much any brush work. And again, black, white, and just a little bit of red. Just a little bit. Good. See, some people are excited. And if you're wondering about the paint that I just use Start acrylic paint from Curry's normally. It is pretty good. It's not too thin, and it's got good vibrancy. I like it. I keep using it all the time. All right, so I'm just going to grab my water cup and then we'll get started. So the first thing we do is we just take our large brush, dip it in our water, and quickly wet the canvas, get a little bit prepped. Any new painters here? If you painted with me before, you can always say, I know I see familiar names, so I'm just curious if we ever have new people painting or if you're painting with us the first time. Yes, I need a cup of tea actually, now that you say it. So I wet the canvas and we're going to be using lots of gray tones, as you know. I like to start with my large brush still, and that is taking I'm going to show you my palette. We're going to start very light. So you want to go pretty drastic with a lot of your gray tones. You want it super light to very dark. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of in-between gray tones throughout your painting, and it just all looks like the same color. So I'm going to start off with this scoop of white, put it over here, and a little tiny dip of black to start. So very little. And you'll notice that it's very, very bright, very light, and it's hardly got any black at all. That's what we want to start with. I like starting a little bit lighter, outlining certain things as well for reference points. Those are helpful. And you don't need anything. I just wet the canvas quick. You should have a canvas that's already white, so it's already been pre-gessoed, so it's ready to go. And I'm going to take this. I'm just going to take this and start with putting a little bit of a horizon line near the top here. It's just above halfway for me. And it might be hard to see. I think I'll go a bit darker so you can see a lot better, but you should go lighter. So I'm going to go darker so you can see exactly where I'm putting this. And notice that it's just above halfway. Remember, very light gray to start. And then, so this is where all our buildings are going to be, and the Big Ben. Also, I like to put a reference point of where this little mini wall is for, this is the water, and this is going to be where the wall is to be placed in the pathway. So something like right here, I'm going to have it come all the way across like that. And as you can see right down here, there's going to be another part of the wall just coming right down. And you're going to make perspective. So if you want to switch to your smaller brush, you want to make it look like it's getting much thinner at the back and bigger at the front. So right here at the back, it's going to be very thin, and it's going to it's going to get a lot wider. So very, very thin at the back. You can switch to your small brush just to mark it down so you have an idea. This is just very rough outlines. I always put it as reference points before I start filling everything in. So I know this is the water, this is going to be the wall area, which we're going to go over later. And then this is part of the pathway into the beginning of the forest. So you can use any brushes I'm going to switch to my brush again, and I'm still taking a bit of a dark color because I want you guys to see it on my canvas. And you can keep using that very light gray. And this is where I'm going to start my forest area. So right around here on this side. So this is all the pathway, the walking pathway, and this is the little mini wall. And this is the horizon line. And feel free to give me thumbs up whenever that is done. So I applied just water before painting. Very simple. You don't even have to do that step. Okay, so I'm just, oh, okay. I have to look on another device to see if we got thumbs up and hearts to see if we can move on to the next step. Perfect. And yes, you can watch this later on if you need to. If you can't do it now, you can watch it later, no problem. All right, so we have basic outlines here, and then I'm going back to my very large brush with that very light gray that I started out with. White and just a touch of black, so it's almost looking like it's white, except it has that little freckle of black added to it. And I'm going to start over here. I want most of my light source to be on this side. It's a very impressionist style painting, so it's not, doesn't have like really defined lines except for the silhouette of the people that I've done. And I like to do a lot of my lines kind of crisscrosses, impressionist style, so they're not all smooth going one direction. So right in this top area, it looks very light, and it's easier to go darker from here. Okay, so you can see lots of crisscrosses, X's that I make, and random strokes going this way and that way, right up to that horizon line, and just fill it all in. Very fun and simple. And you can go over this line too, which shouldn't be a problem since you went lighter. I just outlined mine a bit darker because you can see it a lot better. Yes, I believe you can just rewind this and then you can trace back to anything that you mix. So you can do that, and also you can watch it afterwards. So I want to keep going over to the end, and that is very easy to do to make it a bit darker because we're only using primarily two different colors. So you need to mix a bit more white so you have more paint mixed, and then just take a little bit more black. So maybe 2 dips of black, and you'll notice that it gets kind of like a regular gray. And I take that, start in the corner because you can test it out and see if you like it. And I'm just doing the same technique. I like this technique because it makes it look like the sky is kind of moving and there's like some wind and it's got that that feel of just movement in the sky from a very windy, rainy day in a way. So I start from the edge and then I start dragging it into my lighter area. You'll see that it blends very well because then you could just do little strokes on top of it and you'll notice that it looks more blended and you don't need to do much else. It's just going right over top of the wet light gray and that's it. So you can just change your strokes up if you want to change directions, do different directions. I like to go back and forth. And hopefully that was easy. Just wash off my brush after that. I have to keep looking down at my other device to see comments. And okay, so the other painting, we did a sale and that was one of the paintings that sold. So I can't show you the original right now. And don't worry if it's, you can always pause. I'm pretty sure you can just pause this video if you need to take more time between steps. That you can do. All right, so I'm going to fill in this spot right here in the water. So I'm going to be using more white in that area and some more black. So I'm just getting a little bit of a darker gray. And I'm still using the same brush. I'm going to start from the side, go right over that horizon line a little bit so you can see the difference in color slightly, and just streak it over. I like to keep all my lines pretty straight because it keeps it level with the painting and the water doesn't look like it's all wonky and turned. I do go over other outlines a bit too because you have to cover over everything eventually. So this is a good base coat to start dragging it over to the other side. Yeah, it's hard to, everybody has their own pace. And I wash off my brush after that on the same brush, and it's just white paint. And I just streak it into my dark one. So I have it looking like the water is getting a bit lighter towards my light source on this side. So I just go back and forth here. And then I just leave that to dry for a little bit. And while that's drying, I just wash off this brush and then I move on to another step. So getting base coats down is really good to layer on some paint and add more depth into it. I like to do a base coat on the pathway also. I'm leaving this wall alone because we're going to be putting that in a little bit. So what I start with is another very light gray. That's just taking more white on my clean brush. So it's very light, kind of similar to this on the pathway. It's going to have a bit of a highlight going down. And I'm just going to go right over the edge of that wall. Continuing it down. like that. And okay, so let me know how that's going. You can give me thumbs up whenever you're kind of caught up with me. And now I'm just going to keep layering. So wash that off. So we're going to keep layering on this. Right down here, I add really dark gray as a shadow right on the opposite side of this pathway. Okay, so black, really dark gray. It's not just the black, it's mixed in with this lighter gray, so it still has a lot of black, and it's just a really dark gray. And oops, spilling my white paint. And then you want to keep them all pretty straight and level. Almost took the easel with me. With your canvas. So I just go back and forth right here, kind of following more on the right side of this pathway and keeping the left side much lighter. And I always have my towel handy whenever I clean it off. I like to dab it dry so it's not too wet. So I'm leaving that to dry. And what I'm going to do is just go back into my water with that same dark gray. So the same exact one. And I just streak some of these lines into the water so that you get some more streaky lines in the water. It looks like it has, again, more movement going through it. Makes it look a bit more like water. Thanks, Christine and Rose. Thanks for the stars. Just going over it a little bit. I like using the flat brushes for this so you can get thinner lines. Or it's going to start looking like something as soon as we get all of this done with the base coats and we put our buildings with the Big Ben, and then we're going to start making our forest. So to move on into the forest area, it's pretty easy to kind of get going. It's just, it's a similar dark gray. I like to change the grays up just a little bit so they're not all the same. And there's a pretty interesting and fun technique for this. What I do is you can actually switch up. I have a smaller version of this one. It's more of a square, flat, and also you could use a round tip. Here it is. Something like that. So you can, if you have any one of these, they should work. I can try with both here. I like to just randomly put my, like, kind of clump on the paint, make it look very textured. It's a fun technique to do. You can use the square brush as well. Have it overlap this pathway just a little bit. I like the round brush. So see, I'm just like wisping it out onto the pathway, just a little bit of an overlap, and filling it in pretty roughly because we're going to be adding more texture on it, more leaves, make it look like a fall leaves, that kind of stuff. So that's my base coat for the forest area. And how are we doing, guys, with the painting? Not too bad so far? Okay, so I think we can keep moving on. Um, so this square brush is pretty good for getting, because it's a bit smaller, and if you're using a smaller canvas, you definitely want something a bit smaller. I like to define this wall area just a little bit more. And this should be a bit more dry now. So if it's pretty dry, mine is, then that means we can start layering over top the paint, more gray. So I'm just making another light gray. So that's just pulling in a different spot. You just pull in some of your existing dark gray. I always just mix over top of all my paint colors and adjust them. So lots more white and very little black, and you can get a much lighter gray. I find mixing this pretty fun because you don't have to mix colors. It's just all the same colors. And the forest is pretty similar. It can be the same. It looks about the same, but we're going to be layering over top of it. So it is a more dark gray. I just added a bit more white. I tried to. I'm just going to use this on the thin side and just carry it all the way down like that. And again, start off very thin and then just start making more of an angle opening right along here. So when you fill it in, I fill it in with lines going up and down. very small to a bit wider at the bottom. Going up and down with my strokes, trying to keep them pretty straight as well as I go along this wall. And then afterwards, I take some just black on my brush. You don't have to wash it off. You could just I just picked up some black, and it naturally just makes a really dark gray and also looks like a dark gray on your wet paint here. I like to follow it along again carefully for a shadow just on the bottom part because you just have to go over it again. Luckily, it's all very dark on that side, so if you get some onto your pathway, it's okay. Just drag it out, let it be dark there. Following this dark gray all the way along the bottom again. And you can see I'm still using my flat, smaller brush. It has like the thin point at the end. And just doing little lines, pulling them upwards to get that shadow on the very bottom of this wall. Okay, so that is that step. And just going over any parts that you need to pull out. You can just use that same black on your brush to darken up this corner. Going over in the same direction, back and forth along the shadowed part of the pathway and along the wall. It's actually good to take a step back and look at your painting sometimes. Okay, so we're getting places. We have a lot of this pretty much filled in. There's no more blank canvas. And now we can start layering over top. It's always good to come to like go back and forth to all of your spots. So in your water and in your sky, when it's pretty much dry at this point, yeah, mine's dry, you could just take white on your flat brush and just use the very tip of it, like how we did with the dark gray and the black. We're going to just go over and streak in little lines to create, it almost looks like waves. Just on the light side. And go right up to that wall area. And it makes it look more complete, I find. Okay, so I was just seeing how we're doing. Um, I wonder who is caught up with me since you can pause this video and rewind. You can take your time, like I said before, but I'm wondering who is actually able to paint along with me, no problem. So I think we should start with some of the buildings. And the good brushes for this are this one, again, the same flat, smaller square, and then a more detailed brush. So if you have any detailed brushes like this, or even a much smaller one, these will work well. I'm going to be taking, to start, just something kind of like a regular gray. So medium gray to start, just to outline our buildings. And somebody is joining from UK to watch. That's great. So these buildings, again, very impressionist, pretty abstract. You don't have to, unless you're one of those people that you want to completely outline every building and make it very defined, you can. Otherwise, you can just do what I do, and that is starting from the line here. I like to just get a little bit of a fill to start so I don't have any white gaps or any spaces at the bottom. I want to make it look like it's all very full with buildings and maybe smaller sort of looking, street stuff and lights and cars and stuff. So I just do a line there, and then I'm going to just pull up. I'm going to go a bit darker so you can see it. You can go lighter like how I did, but if I go a bit darker, you'll see it a lot better. I'll pull up some of my paint and just make random sized buildings. And they're not perfect. They're all pretty much rectangular, and some of them are smaller. So you can see I go over them. Some of them are smaller in front of other buildings. I don't go too high because I want the main focus to be on the clock tower. So I'm going to start off a little bit smaller, and then you can always make them bigger afterwards. This is how I do it. Just go all the way across, and I fill them in, so you can fill them in as well. So that when they're drying, you can come back and add some highlights onto them. That's the start of them. We keep going. And for placement for the clock tower, it can be anywhere you really want to place it. I think I'm going to place mine right about here, kind of in the center a little bit. Starting with a pretty tall rectangle, and then it's going to square off right here at the top. And I'm just leaving a lot of space here for where I want to start forming the top of the tower. And that is starting to make more of a rectangular shape. And then a little bit of a point at the top. And then I just go over the side a little bit. So that's a rough shape for it. And you can get your smaller brush to, see, I'm just like, it's kind of like doodling for me. I like to scribble it in. I don't make too many defined lines. It's going to take a long time and it's too stressful to have to define all the lines. I kind of like the look of this, where I made it very impressionist and kind of like abstract looking. We all know where this is, and this is just going to be the clock in the middle there. And I do a couple straight lines coming down. See, I'm still using the thin side of this brush. I find it very easy to work with. Some dark lines. Creates more texture, more depth into this empty space. And I just shadow a little bit on this side. A little bit onto my right side, just put a bit more darkness over here. So to keep going on building onto this tower, if you want to go above and beyond, you want to make more 3D buildings, you can follow me and do that. Otherwise, you can carry on with the rest of your buildings. I just go to a bit of a lighter gray, so that's just adding more white from what I was using before. So much lighter. And I like to go along, just kind of go along the other side, which is my left side here, and trace around it, make parallel lines to create more of a 3D shape. And you'll notice that when I go back to my dark gray, if you accent these lines on the other side, it makes it look like you can see the building a bit turned in a different, bit of a different position direction. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. And it's not too difficult to do. And I'll come back to this and do some little touch-ups on it, like doing some work in here, maybe highlighting a bit more. I'm going to leave it to dry because I don't want to keep going over it while it's still wet. It kind of becomes all one solid color. So I'm just going to keep going with my buildings. I'm going to go back to this dark gray to start as a base coat before I highlight things and put more layers on top. And you can make different types of buildings too. You can make some with triangle tops. See how I went over that line again? That's like there's another, maybe a wall on the other side, and it's not just buildings and then water. That's like another barrier before the water. And I'm just going to keep going, keep making more buildings. More rectangles, more squares. I'm going to do some a little bit taller, different, slightly different shapes. And I'm filling them in as I go. So if you're wondering where exactly to stop, you can somewhere around here is fine because it would continue on um, all the way over. But I'm going to have like more trees, basically a forest around here. So you can stop any point. If you don't want it clashing too much with your trees, maybe stop around this area. So I think that's where I'm going to stop. I'm just going to leave them because I know I'm going to have lots of leaves and more of a forest here. I think I'll just leave it kind of at this point right there. Hi, Sanjitha from Abu Dhabi. I like to take little pauses just to give you some time to paint, even though you can pause it yourself. Forgot to fill in that building, so I'm just going to do that. I don't know why I didn't. I was just making the shape and I just didn't fill it in. Okay. So I'm washing off this square, small, well, medium brush, and I'm taking my white again. So I always go from like drastic to, opposite spectrums of the different colors with the white and the black. I'm going to just go over right here because this should be pretty dry. Press a bit harder as I go down towards the other side, going along the top here. I'm making, it looks like a ledge on this wall. So press very light at the very top here, and then just follow it down. And then as you get down towards this bottom area, it just starts looking like it's getting a bit bigger, which is perfect for the point perspective of the painting. And it makes it look like a bit of a ledge on the wall here. There. I'm not going to keep touching it. And also this is where I do touch-ups. Whenever you want to do touch-ups, especially with white, just wait for it to dry. I'm going to add in some white, same brush, the white, and streak in into the dark gray. So it's not as choppy. It has a little bit of a blend. And it should pop it out a lot more as well. So you'll see that it's coming along here. There's a lot of white, and then it just kind of goes to a lot of dark down here, away from all of my light on this side. And I'm still waiting for this to dry, these buildings. I don't want to do anything while it's still wet. I'm going to be starting to work on the trees and some of the leaves on here on the side where the forest is. So this is pretty fun. I find it very kind of carefree. I go back to my medium round and I'm going to be taking, just going to take my palette. I'm going to be taking just a medium gray because I have a pretty dark gray here, but I'm layering over top. White and a bit of black, mostly white so you can get just a regular looking gray. You can always adjust it. And I'm going to just do little flicks just along here. So it looks like there's some leaves that have fallen onto the pathway along the side. And I'm going to press harder at the bottom. And just do little touches at the top. because it's further away, so you don't need to do as much detail. But I'm just going to press a bit harder to make it look like the leaves are a bit bigger along here. So we're just going to be started layering because you can see some of the shadowing underneath these leaves when I do this. Just going to leave that pretty dark because I want to make it look like it's pretty much getting into the forest. And then I just take plain black. You don't have to wash off your brush. Just go over some of these little spots to make a bit more of a shadow kind of appearance around this area. So you have some layers. See, I'm just doing the same thing. Going a little bit in between, but also just going right over top because I want to make it look like there's kind of like a pile of leaves in some spots. There's lots of them that have fallen on the ground. Okay, that is the start of that. And just give me a thumbs up or the heart emoji if you're still doing great, following along. Okay, so I think that's enough waiting time. Maybe. Anyways, you're probably working at your own pace. If you're watching this later, oh, okay, there we go. I see all of the likes and the hearts. You guys, a lot of you actually are caught up with me. That's great. Great to know. So, to start with the trees, I'm not going to be using this medium, larger brush because you don't want to, and it's not very good. It's not very good for making the lines of the trees. I would suggest something that has a flat edge, kind of like the square, or this one, or detailed. So one of those, whatever you think is best. I will be using the smaller one. And I'm going to start with just plain black. Plain black on my brush. Kind of wipe some of it off. You don't want to have it like too much paint on there, but you do want it to be a bit coated. If you have it too coated, it's going to be very blobby. So what you should do is, I have kind of like one tree right here that I make more of the focus. I'm going to plant it right around here. And it's going to go pretty straight up. Stop and then start making it wider at the bottom for the trunk. So this is basically a stick with it's kind of wide at the end here. It's on the dark gray and it's maybe a bit harder to see, but that's the point. It's going to look like a forest, and it's going pretty high up, and that's where I start branching out. I'm going to branch out from about halfway up the tree and just start making kind of like little Y shapes. Don't be afraid to make them long branches stretching out. The wider you make it, the more leaves you have to put onto the tree. Maybe a little one down here, some more branches. You're not going to see a lot of these branches anyways. They kind of remind me a bit like wishbone shapes because of the way that they go, and they all look like they have some Y shapes going on. See how it looks like, or a V. But they're not all straight. They kind of have a little bit of bends and curves in them to make them look like you're dancing in the wind a little bit. So that's a good start. And from here, you can actually just, when you feel like you have enough branches, you don't have to go too wild because it's going to be mostly filled by leaves. It's going to be, all of this is going to be covered with lots and lots of leaves. You're only going to see mostly the bottom, and what else you're about to make is more distant tree trunks here. Like there's one just right back here next to it to make it look like there's more trees around. And maybe just a couple more along here. You can, since they're higher up on the canvas, that's where they look like they're a bit further away, so they're not going to be as big as this one down here. You can do a couple little lines in the background to make it look like there's some trees forming. But again, you don't have to go crazy. And then I just go back over my main one again, just to pop it out. So a little bit closer with just the black for the trees. And I wait for that to dry before I come back to it. You can keep using this same small brush, which I'll be doing. I just wash it off and start adding a bit more highlights and details into the buildings. A little bit of water, and just I'm taking white with a touch of black, so it's a super light gray. It's supposed to be more of a highlight, and you can just go along whatever like parts are supposed to be more lighter, and so just along the left side for me, mostly in this clock tower. And I like to clump on my paint for this, make it look very textured, semi-outline, just go along sides of some of your buildings, pick the ones that are mostly in front, and you can just do like little lines to make kind of like windows, wannabe windows. You can dot them in, and if you're sticking with my style, you don't need to make each square individually, because it's the style that we're doing is not really like that. It's more kind of carefree and very impressionist. So if you need to go back to any of your dark gray, you can, just to pop it back out. And also for some dark gray, I put little tiny little dots to mimic the clock. Something like that. Alternatively, you can work on this for forever. I mean, if you want to layer on the paint, you can go on the opposite side of your highlight and just go over it with your shadow, just to shadow it more. I think the more layers you add, the more it has a lot more depth into it. And if this is outside your comfort zone, um, you can tell me about it later and show me the results. Maybe it was a lot easier than you thought it was going to be doing this detailed work. It's not as detailed, it's just getting the shadowing, all the depth in to create the look that we're achieving. So I'm just going along with my shadow and also my highlight on all my buildings. So shadow is on my right side, highlights on the left. And making these little dots for the windows, sort of windows. And you can see a lot of my random strokes up close a bit more. So one of the last little things that I put along here is, remember I said you want to create with some, I do this with black or you can just do dark gray. I go pretty, I'd like to go very, like very opposite of what I was just doing. I don't have much black around here, so I'm just going to put some more of like a silhouette in the front to make it look like there's maybe another, like I said, another barrier. It could be like boats alongside around the water, bumps and stuff to just make it look like the buildings don't just randomly end. So it's supposed to look like there's more of a street going on or a wall. And I just do little lines flicking up for, could be street lights. So the second barrier right here before it hits the water. All right, so just checking to see where we're at, how we're doing. You can always let me know how it's going. I did do a little bit of an oopsie over here, so I just cover it up with my light gray. It's gone. When it's dry, it's easy to cover over top. There we go. All right. So hopefully our trees are pretty close to dry. It doesn't have to be fully because we're still using the same colors and it's not a big deal. I am switching back to my medium. And we're going to be doing lots of fun leaves. I'm going to do the couple right here, very last. So whenever you feel like you are good with your painting and you're ready to move on to that, that's when you can start it. For the leaves, first what we want to start with is actually black. So I use black and I want to make it look very contrasted, where it has black to the white. So you have those shadows in there, and then you also have the highlights in there, and maybe some in between. So starting from the very corner in the forest, where it'd be darkest in the forest, like it's going in there. So I'm just going to tap it and use my round brush to do this. I find it helps and works really well. So you don't have to do too much black out on this side because I'm going to do mostly a lot of white there, but I do have a bit to start. So you already have some depth in the making. You don't just want all white on that side. I'm just going to down right over top of everything. I'll put my branches, cover a lot of it up. Yeah, it looks like a lot. So those were just dabs to start, just tapping away, doing lots of them. Then I wash this off. Actually, before you wash it off, you can put a bit more of the black down here. Just another little layer. And now I'm switching to plain white. And I'm going to start on this side where I want it to be mostly lighter because this is out in the open more, so I feel like a lot of the light's going to be hitting more on that side. You'll notice that it actually picks up the black and start making more of a gray as you get over here, which is perfect. And I don't even try to blend it in, just leave it clumpy as is. I like the texture on it. So you can pick up a lot of white paint on my brush as a big blob and just start blobbing it on. Start from out here, keep it the lightest part there, and then work your way in. Same thing for the bottom. Just clump on some of the highlights down here. little dabs so the leaves look like they've fallen on the floor, on the ground. And if it picks up the black, that's okay. It just makes a bit of gray. If you're looking to do a highlight on a bit on the side of your tree, on the right side, you can put a bit following along there just to create a bit more texture in there. If you do too much, all you have to do is go back with your black and just tone it down. It's easy to fix. And like I said, this is a lot of back and forth with the painting. You can go back to your black or just make a gray and add some in over top so that it's not too much white leaves. Just, you know, have fun with it. So just curious, who's painted with us before or with me? Hi, Donna. Just saw your message. Just taking a little minute breather here before I guess moving on to the couple. Yeah. And like I said, you can go back to other things if you want to put on another layer. Maybe you want to put on another layer with some gray of some buildings here and just add them in. Maybe it was too bare, you want to put more. It's okay. Sometimes I like put little lines at the top of the buildings, almost like airplane lights or something like that. Just another layer. And you will definitely need a smaller brush for the couple standing right here along the pathway. I even almost suggest a pencil first if you want to use pencil, or just outline in some white before going into the black to fill it in as a silhouette. All right, so for the couple standing right about here, first off, have them stand a little bit higher up from the very bottom. That way they don't take up so much space, because if they're at the bottom, they have to be much bigger. They'll be in the foreground. They still pretty much are, but I'm just going to go up a little bit higher, and the height of them is kind of the whole height of my hand. So if you're using the same canvas, maybe you can do the same thing as reference. That's from the feet to pretty much the top of the umbrella or so. And start with your outlines, like your shapes, and fill it in with black afterwards. Try not to use black right away. I will be using black because when I use white, you won't be able to see it very well. And if your umbrella is going to be red or whatever pop of color you want it to be. So this is where they're both going to be pretty much standing. I like to just do a little bit of a line as a reference. You can take your black and just add this in as a deeper shadow anywhere along your wall too. Sometimes I just add it in as I have it. So there's my little reference point there. And I like to start with the guy standing first, and then I have kind of the girl leaning in, wrapping her arms a bit around. So for him, he's the way he's standing, it's not like a straight line up per se. It's got a little bit of a lean in. So this is the back, and there's a little bit of a bump for a bit of a bum. And then it kind of, the back curves in a little bit and leans in just a touch before it gets into the head. And you don't want to make the head too big to start. You can always make it bigger. I like to just add hair as I'm doing this, kind of just like feather it out depending on what you want it to look like. You want it longer, shorter. And the good thing is that there's going to be an umbrella covering a lot of this at the top. And then for the rest of the body, I'm going to start at the bottom again for where, just before where the shoes are. Very thin for the very bottom because it's, you know, the calves and the ankles, they're not as thick as when it gets into the thigh. So he's very profile view. And I know it's not going to make too much sense right now because the girl is leaning into him, so you're not going to see a lot of the rest of his body anyways. Actually, that's kind of funny with this. Just make sure there's a little bit of a neck from the head before it gets into the chest area. Come back to him later. I'm going to do the woman, the girl facing. So about the same height. You can adjust if you want her taller, shorter. Circle for the head because I already have this as reference. And I'm putting it pretty close together, almost like, you know, they're touching on the face. I don't know if they're getting close to that, like they're kissing in a way. And I find when you do this, she's leaning in a bit more. So she's got her body leaning in more into, like, her hips are going in a little bit more. So I'm going to make kind of like an upper body going inwards. It's like a kind of shaped like a triangle. And There's a bit of a neck before we do her hair here. And then her waist, she's got like a little bit of a flick out for her dress. So they're almost touching. They're going to be touching to lean in and hug. I actually try to cover this area so there's really no gaps because they have arms wrapping around. It's all in a silhouette. I always go over it afterwards when it's dry to highlight certain spots to make it look like you can accent the arms that are wrapping. So you see this curve because it's like she's being pulled in. And you could do her legs straight as well, but I do a little bit of a kick outwards. One of them is straight. So start with a thin line. A bit thicker for the thigh, and then thinner for the bottom of the leg. And then her leg popping out just a little bit, like a knee pop. You can do that. And I'm just making things a little bit bigger, so it's not as thin. And her hair is going to come down. And I like to make it look like it's got like a bit of a curl or a soft curl at the end. It's kind of blowing away. So this is definitely the more trickier part of the painting. Creating a silhouette of a couple. Because everything is mushed together. The arms, you can't really see because they're going to be wrapped around here in the middle, which I will show you how to highlight. But overall, try to make it look like there's no gaps in between, except for their legs, and then a little bit between them on the neck and the chest area. Thanks, Haley, for the kind words, and Allison, thank you. I just have extra black on my brush, and I just kind of put it in. Use the excess paint because I can. One of those types of paintings, you can do this. Alternatively, you didn't have to do the couple. You could just do one person. You don't have to do anybody. Maybe even just a dog or cat. And I know that creating an outline for this is pretty difficult as well. It's not so much just making a shape here and there. It's kind of a whole bunch of things put together. So with your small brush, whenever you're done, you can just make a little bit of like a foot at the bottom. For the guy, if you want to, for the partner, like whoever you want this to be, if you want to do a second person, you can do a long pant kind of thing. So it looks like they're wearing more of like a dress pant. And the girl, she's wearing a dress, so you can kind of see, the shape of her leg at the bottom. I don't do um, pants at the bottom. And I do a little bit of like a heel. The heel, you won't see too much where they're stepping together, but the kick, the foot at the back here is more of just it's like flat with a slight curve and then a gap with a line for a heel. And you can do a couple lines for a bit of shadow coming down here. So while I wait for that to dry, before I do my umbrella, I'm just touching up some of my leaves back here. Another little extra layer of highlight. Tones down a lot of the black if you want to. And anything else you need to do. So to do a bit of a highlight following along, you can do some following along the hair and the shape of her dress, also making an arm just at the top here to make it look like she's kind of hugging, wrapping her arm. She has an arm, so does he. I just like to accent certain parts of the body and it looks more dimension and has a lot more shape and depth into it instead of just that silhouette. Okay, let me know how the people went for you guys, if you even did them in the first place. I think I can start the umbrella very shortly. Just want the black to be dry. All right. The umbrella, you can have it any angle that you want to. Mine is more facing you, the viewer or the painter. I'm going to take my smaller brush and I'm going to start with a light pink first because I want it to cover the background. I think I'm going to have it right around here and just make some, just start with a line, and then what I do is I make those little inverted, almost like inverted lines for umbrella. It's kind of first, okay, so actually it's easier to just make a bit of a circle. And then from here you can make them a bit more inverted. Very rough shape. We're just starting with a base coat by just filling it in. It's picking up a bit of my black, but I want to wait for it to dry before I fill it in with actual red afterwards. So just a rough shape for a circle umbrella. It's actually covering all of the guy's head here, but that's okay. And I'm going to shape it a lot more. It's very blobby looking. It's going to have, you know, like those inverted lines, those curves going around. It has a slight bit of that along here, just to get the shape of the umbrella. Yep, and I'll just bring it a bit closer too. So while that is drying, I'm going to go along the bottom part of the ledge that we made, accent it, and then the top part of my ledge. There's two lines just to accent that. So if you need to, you can actually just do a second coat of white too. And we're almost done. If you're at this step. If you're behind, then you'll see me soon. So just waiting for that to dry just for another minute, I think. You can also just keep it pink if you want it as well. Maybe a hot pink or purple, blue, teal, blue and a touch of yellow. Okay, I'm going to take my plain red and I'm going to put a little line for where I want more of my center of my umbrella to be. So that's going to determine the angle. And from here, I'm just going to make almost like you're cutting it into pie shapes, the little cake slices. Start shaping the umbrella.